Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Questioning Christianity podcast here on the internet. I'm one of the hosts of the internet, Dan McClellan, and my co-host is Rob Helton, and he's sitting across the table from me. How's it going, Rob?
Good, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We did want to tackle a little bit different topic for this week in light of the news stories and the rhetoric and things that are going on about gun and school violence. And I think one of the things that's maybe especially troubling for folks like us, and maybe for you as a listener of this podcast, is the tone or the extremism that's associated with this type of conversation. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to do a little bit of a special episode today to try to have, as best we can, a conversation that meets somewhere in I don't know, how would you describe that? Not in the middle necessarily, but...
Well, I think that just takes a more thoughtful approach to all the different ideas and opinions, and particularly what the teachings of Jesus have to say.
Yeah.
In fact, we are sort of fielding a question that went something like this: do the teachings of Jesus address gun control?
Yeah.
Of course, Jesus lived in the first century and didn't have guns, but they did have swords. And since that it is a topic that you're certainly hearing about every time you turn on the radio or on your TV or go online, everybody has a Facebook post about it. And those posts seem to be on one extreme or another, like you were saying, Dan. Mm-hmm. And I thought that it might be good if we tried to expand the conversation.
Sure. And we're going to give it a shot. We give you no guarantees that we'll be able to successfully do that over the next few minutes or so. But before we jump in, I just want to encourage you to check us out at our Facebook page, facebook.com/questioningchristianity, and join the conversation there. Post a comment or send us a message and let us know what you think about this topic, or if you have suggestions for future shows. So, Rob, where do we get started here? Jesus has a lot to say about violence, and he has a lot to say about loving your enemies. But this is a topic that involves that, but also more of this, the legislative aspect of violence as well. So Where would you like to get started?
Well, I think that I would like to start the conversation by saying that I agree with my anti-gun control friends with at least the essence of their argument. So now if you are pro-gun control, stick with us, because I think that we have some things to say that you might find interesting. But if you are against gun control, against legislating gun control, your argument, or at least the argument that some have made, is that the gun is not the problem, that the person is the problem. I read a Facebook post the other day that said something like, when I was going to school, my gun hung in the rack in my truck sitting on school property, and we never had a school shooting.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope my pops doesn't mind me telling you this.
Yeah.
He was in high school, and he had to do a presentation in some kind of business class where he had to sell something to the class, a sales demonstration. And so he did a presentation on as a gun store. And so he had brought in, a tabletop worth of different weapons.
Wow.
And gave a presentation.
You'd have to have armed guards to do that now.
It's just kind of wild to think about. I don't know, that popped in my mind.
It's a different world.
Yeah, a lot has changed.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
that contributed nearly nothing to the conversation.
No, it's good. That's all good. But the point is that, the problem is with the person. The problem is, in a person's heart, not in a weapon that they might hold in their hand. And I agree with that. I believe that the teachings of Jesus and the Bible in general supports that argument. Jesus taught that it was the condition of the human heart that was what he was after for transformation. There's one place where Jesus says in his Sermon on the Mount, he said, you've been taught not to murder. You've heard it said that you shall not murder. But I say, don't be angry with your brother. So what's Jesus getting at there? Murder is the act, but anger is what precedes the act that originates in the human heart. So the idea of Jesus is that it's the human heart that needs to be transformed. We could go further into the biblical history. In fact, we could go all the way to the beginning of the Hebrew Bible, and right after the story of creation and the sin of the man and woman, they have these two sons, one named Cain, one named Abel, and Cain kills his brother Abel. Well, if you go back and read that story, and I guess it's in Genesis chapter 4, what you see is that Cain is angry. And God actually comes to Cain and he says, "Why are you angry?" And he warns Cain. He says, "Cain, sin is lurking at the door and you need to master it." And of course, the story goes that Cain doesn't listen to God, and he goes out into the field and he kills his brother. In fact, if you read the story, there's not even a mention of what weapon that Cain uses. It just says that he rose up and slew his brother. The problem was not with what was in Cain's hand. The problem was with what was in Cain's heart: anger, malice, hatred. So if you're of the opinion that it's not, guns are not the problem, that it's the human heart, I think that's a pretty biblical argument. Okay, so let's go a little bit further, though.
Okay.
I feel like I'm monopolizing our conversation here, Dan. I'm not giving you a chance to jump in.
This is a tough one, man. That was kind of the argument as it was laid out for me growing up. Now, I wasn't around a lot of guns, despite the fact that my dad gave a pretty convincing sales presentation in high school. But it does make sense. I mean, the logic kind of carried, I think, a step further is that no matter what the weapon, when someone's heart has gone rotten or cold or black, filled with hate, that if they continue down that path, something destructive is going to happen.
Yeah.
So what can we do as a society or as citizens of a country or as just people in a neighborhood to stop that or to slow that from happening?
Yeah, and there are a lot of policy issues, I guess, and I'm not a politician, and I don't pretend to have all the answers to that. What I would encourage all of us to do is to think deeply about what was central to the teachings of Jesus. Was Jesus a person who taught peace and enemy love and nonviolence? Or was Jesus a revolutionary that tried to lead his disciples in a military takeover and utilize weapons? Well, if you listen to this podcast at all, you know that we've said over and over again that Jesus had inaugurated a new kingdom in the world, a new government that was totally opposite to the other governments in the world, the other empires in the world that utilized violence. Jesus led a non-violent revolution. So I think that any honest student of the Bible, particularly any honest student of the teachings of Jesus, would have to agree that Jesus taught nonviolence. Try to imagine Jesus doing violence. That, to me, doesn't register.
Yeah, I guess the closest he ever got was turning over the tables there in the temple that one time.
Yeah. And I think that was prophetic drama. That I don't think that was Jesus losing his temper. I think that he was in the vein of Isaiah and other prophets who used really over-the-top object lessons to try to get their point across.
Oh, well, that's a shame because I always kind of felt like he was doing what I do when I flip a game board over.
Yeah, just losing is cool.
So I guess maybe it's different. All right.
All right. So let's take a minute. In all fairness, let's take a minute and let's see. Does Jesus ever talk about weapons? There are a few places. I'll talk about two of those places where Jesus references the sword, which was the primary weapon, of course. In his day, it would be like the handgun for our day, or maybe the assault rifle. I don't know. But, okay, so there's a place one place in Luke chapter 22 where Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's getting ready he's preparing to go to the cross. He's trying to prepare them for what they're going to be called to as disciples. And this is a passage that's debated a lot. It's a little bit controversial, but let me read some of it to you. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus says to his disciples, "When I sent you without purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" He's referencing the time when he sent them out on a missionary journey, and he told them, don't take a purse, don't take a bag, don't take sandal, don't take extra shoes. It was a short-term mission trip. But he says, now I say to you, if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. All right, so
very strange.
Very strange for Jesus. So what's Jesus talking about? Is Jesus saying, okay, I'm getting ready to ramp up this rebellion, and I want you to make sure that you're armed? Well, the disciples go on to say to him later on, they say, well, see, Lord, here we have 2 swords. Out of the 12 of them, they managed to come up with a couple of swords, and Jesus said, it's enough. The point is, I believe, and it's like I said, now it's a debated topic, it's a debated passage, but Jesus is trying to say to his disciples, I want you to understand this is not a short-term mission trip that you're on now. This is not going to happen quickly. I want you to know that you're going to be in this for the long haul. So I want you to do what you would do to prepare for a long journey. No one would go on a long journey in those days without having a sword. It was not just a weapon. It wasn't even just for self-defense. It was a tool that every good prepared, like a Boy Scout, would have this particular tool with him. It would be like me saying to my grandson, make sure you take your utility knife or your Boy Scout knife with you so you'll have all the tools that you need. That's the one place in Scripture that some people point to say Jesus advocated the use of weapons. Now, beside of that, flip that coin and I can take you to lots and lots of passages where Jesus advocates not using weapons, advocates not killing your enemies, praying for your enemies, non-retaliation.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, I guess, is the scene in the garden where Peter's swinging for somebody's head and gets their ear.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that's another place where Jesus uses the term sword. In that context, when Jesus, or when Peter is trying to take a guy's head off with one of these 2 swords.
Oh yeah, I guess it's one. Yeah,
that Luke talks about. And he misses and just cuts the guy's ear off. Jesus picks the guy's ear up and he puts it back on, and miraculously he heals him. And then he turns to Peter and he says, look, those who live by the sword perish by the sword. Put your sword away. So Jesus is true to his final hours. Jesus would not raise his hand against an enemy. Now, let me just follow this on through,
okay,
Dan, and then you can ask whatever questions you want to ask. Okay, in light of that, now, however you feel about self-defense, whether you think of yourself as a true pacifist or whether you think of yourself as more of a person who would follow like the teachings of Augustine that advocated for just war or for self-defense, however you feel about that, I think that surely we can agree that Jesus is advocating a reduction in violence, not an escalation in violence.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, what would it look like if we were really, as a society, what would it look like if we were really, truly seeking to follow the heart of Jesus? What if that was what was burning inside of our hearts? And then how would that play out then with this issue of gun control? maybe we would soften our extremist positions and try to come together to find measures, legislation even, that would help us reduce the number of at least the most destructive weapons that are out there.
It feels though like it's on a kind of like a trajectory that's hard to turn.
Yeah.
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 Like once it's like one thing, one turn. Well, what's the one good turn? I don't know. I can never think of these. Why do I start
one bad
these?
turn deserves another.
There you go. I think that's what I was trying to get at. But it's like, it just kind of escalates. And so it takes something kind of remarkable to stop that cycle and reverse it.
I think it has escalated, Dan. I think that, when I look on Facebook and Twitter, it's like everybody's at opposite ends of the pole. People are either caving in to the fear mongering that's going on that says if you allow any legislation restricting guns, then they're going to take away your Second Amendment rights and you're going to lose your guns. They're going to come in your house and confiscate your guns. I think that's fear mongering. I think that's people taking advantage of the fear in people, or even instilling fear in people to try to push their agenda, and that's just wrong. On the other hand, if you're on the side that says if we just had a law that outlawed these assault rifles, then we would never have any more school shootings. I think that's naive. Mm-hmm. That's not realistic. It is a heart problem. It is a problem within the human heart, and Christians need to be the ones that are living lives of nonviolence and love, so that we can demonstrate to others the way of Jesus, so that those hearts can be transformed. If your heart longs to reflect the heart of Jesus, is it just unrealistic to say, let's try to do something to reduce the number of these weapons, or to change the kind of weapons that you can purchase? To me, that seems reasonable.
Maybe the message is to encourage you to not be driven by fear, and certainly not by anger.
Yeah,
which I guess ultimately is what Cain did. We can't necessarily control, I don't think, the issue. We can control how we respond to it, control how we react to it. And so one of the things that you had said many episodes back just popped into my mind. It was this idea of assuming the best in others.
Yeah.
And so maybe if we are having these conversations, whether it's online or hopefully it's with actual people, I encourage you to have conversations with human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea.
Little side note there, a plug for conversation. Assume the best in others. So if you're on one side of this debate and your neighbor or your friend or family members on the other, I don't know. I think that would help tone down at least the rhetoric of the reactionary conversation.
Yeah, so, I agree. I think when you're face to face with someone, there's a little more civility.
Yeah,
it's easy to be belligerent when you're tweeting.
That's right.
And can I make one more point?
Sure,
Dan, about this. The other thing that I've heard that people say, legislation is not the answer, and we shouldn't try to legislate this. To me, that doesn't exactly make sense to me, because we do attempt legislation in other areas of our lives. For instance, I've heard it said, if you pass a law, if you legislate this, then it's just the bad people will be the only ones who have guns, or something along those lines. If you make a particular gun illegal, then the bad guys are going to be the only ones who have that gun. Well, we don't say that with things like drug control. We don't say if you make heroin illegal, then only the bad people will be, shooting up with heroin. Now, we still pass a law that says that drug is illegal. If you said if you make underage drinking illegal, then only the bad kids will drink beer.
That's a little bit different, better example perhaps, because I'm not into heroin so much. But I like the occasional cold one.
Yeah. Okay. So, but we still tell our kids you can't drink until you're 21, and we make that a law. By the way, the guy who did the shooting in Florida bought his weapon legally when he was 18. So I certainly don't want to inflame anyone's passions. I don't want my words to cause you to become even more entrenched in whatever position you take. Our goal with this is to stimulate some thoughtful conversations about, I think what Dan said about conversations is really good. Stimulate some thoughtful conversations. Let's come up with some solutions. And if you're a follower of Jesus, let's see if we can come up with some solutions that reflect the heart of Jesus.
We'd like to know what you have to think about this episode or others. Check us out at facebook.com/questioning Christianity. Our podcast is available on all of the big podcasting internet service thingies, iTunes, which occasionally charges Rob for no reason. You can also find it on the TuneIn app and Google Play Music. So just subscribe if you haven't already, and help us out by letting your friends know a little bit about the show. We'd appreciate that. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
That's about it for me.
Yeah, our last episode, we talked a little bit about the red letters. We're going to get back into that on our next one.
Definitely.
And so I think this will lead into that conversation in a way, because Jesus has a lot of hard things to say about violence and love of enemies, and we'll get into some of that with the Sermon on the Mount. So that's coming up. We'll call it a day right there. Thank you so much for listening. For Rob Helton, I'm Dan McClellan, and we'll see you next time on Questioning Christianity.